dare sleep in a haunted cemetery? They wanted clicks and a legend. That was how the six of them, Maya, the planner, Luke, the skeptic Jordan, the camera guy, Becca, the thrill seeker, Trevor, the history nerd, and Danny, the small-town paramedic, ended up turning down a gravel road outside Fredericksburg, Virginia, where the hills still held the bruised memory of the Civil War. They told themselves they were here to test courage to sleep till dawn in a forgotten cemetery fenced by lichen-gnawed iron. But what they were really testing was whether an old wound could stay quiet when the living stepped on it. Gravel whispered under their tires as the SUV crawled to a stop. Trevor said the place had once belonged to a farmhouse commandeered as a field hospital in 1862. After the battle, bodies piled up faster than names could be written, and in the fever of retreat, nobody came back for the men outside the official graveyard. Those went into hurried pits or nowhere at all. Now the official part had the neat stones and flags. The unofficial part was where they were going a slope of crooked markers, some broken, some sunken like missing teeth, and a sullen dip in the earth that looked like it never forgot. Somewhere out in the fog, a low horn of traffic smudged the night, then thinned to silence, as if the world cleared its throat and decided not to speak again. Maya filmed the intro with the practiced brightness of a host who knew precisely how much fear to flash in her eyes. We're outside the Cold Orchard Cemetery, unlisted, unkept, and according to local stories, unwanted by the dead. Tonight, we'll do the thing no one else will stay from midnight to dawn. It would have been a throwaway line if not for the way the fog clung to every breath, as if it wanted to hear each word. Their boots scuffed the gravel, a dry hiss that seemed too loud against the wet air. They set up next to a toppled angel whose stone wings were feathered with moss. The gear was familiar. 2 tents, a lantern, a thermal camera, 3 handheld mics, a digital recorder Trevor claimed was museum grade, and a bugle. The bugle was a stunt prop, a tarnished brass find from a vintage store that Becca insisted would seal the theme. Trevor hated it. "You don't mock the dead," he muttered, the one church kid among them, though he hadn't been to church since high school. When he lifted the bugle to move it, the mouthpiece made a soft, metallic ping that felt like the smallest pebble tossed in a black lake. By the time they finished, night had settled with the resolve of a locked door. The lantern made a gold island on damp grass. Beyond it, a world of gray. Becca proposed the ground rules. Each person had to spend 15 minutes alone walking the border of the old graves. No phones, no talking except into the mic, no leaving before dawn. The others laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was to admit the air felt thick in their throats, as if memory had met. From the trees, a branch cracked just a clean wooden snap, and the sound ran along the fence like a finger on a comb. Jordan went first with the thermal cam. He narrated like a pro, keeping the lens steady voice calm. He read names off stones nobody had read in a century if the stones still had names. And for a moment, the dare felt almost gentle, like caretaking. "Whoever you were," Jordan said, "we see you." In answer, the wind moved a long, soft push that sounded like a coat sleeve dragging over bark. He kept walking. His mic caught a small rhythmic tick, clink, 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 as if a chain hung loose somewhere and tapped itself to stay awake. The fog shifted. Where the land dipped, darkness pooled thicker, a concavity that refused light. Jordan paused at the edge of it, without knowing why. "You guys buried too shallow." Trevor called from camp, trying to deflate his own nerves. Rain does that, slump and settle like a bad cake. Jordan's footsteps made a muted thud, 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 the kind of sound that ends too fast when the ground turns hollow. He stepped back deliberately. I'm not going into that. Luke laughed sharp and a little cruel the way he laughed when he was scared. Bro, it's dirt. Relax. He took the second shift and swaggered along the fence, rattling it with his palms so he wouldn't have to look too long at any single stone. The fence wires sang a faint metallic tremor, a thin zzz that twanged and died. Luke kept up a running bit about Confederate ghosts being bad landlords. Your month's late on rent, sir, and your house is, missing until the joke ran out of air. Somewhere behind him, hoofbeats shuffled, not the bright clop of a road horse, but the dull sodden stamp of weight settling into mud. He spun around. Guys, no one was there. The lantern's island looked farther than it had a second ago. The fog had rearranged the world in the way fog does, with no sound of moving furniture, only the new room revealed. A horse gave a wet, breathy whicker that shivered the hair on Luke's arms. He started back faster than he meant to, footsteps too crisp, and nearly collided with the toppled angel. Okay, he said, dropping his mic back into Maya's palm. Now I get why this video will hit 1 million views. Donnie went third. She was the rational window. She'd seen real horror in an ambulance at 3 a.m., gunshot victims who tried to apologize for bleeding overdoses, who woke up with a gasp and begged for the dream back. She didn't scare easy. She walked slow, scanning reflexively for hazards. Sinkholes, rusty wire, displaced stone, she called out in a medic's list. As she stepped by a cracked obelisk, a whisper gathered low to the ground, the close, granular susurrus of soil shifting under its own weight. She crouched and touched the earth. It felt cold and then colder, the way steel feels colder than air, because it drinks your warmth. She stood quickly. Don't linger here. She told the others, not because of ghosts, but because the ground could collapse. Maya filmed a B-roll sweep of the broken markers and the wedge-dark trench. She spoke lower now without meaning to. We came to stir the past, she said, eyes shining the way they did when a story was about to land. But what if the past is not a pond you can toss a stone into? What if it's a lung, and every word you say here is air it will take and push back out? Her sentence was followed by a soft, almost ceremonial hush, the kind of silence that feels chosen, not accidental. And then from far, far off, as if from inside the fog's own throat, a single note of brass rose. It was thin at first, a bleached reed of a sound, the idea of a note. Then it focused into a clear cutting call. A bugle's reveille pulled tight as wires slicing the night into perfect angles. The note didn't echo. It drilled, carving through distance, as if the air were wood and the sound a bit. Maya forgot to breathe for 3 seconds and then remembered in a rush. Is that a house nearby? Jordan asked stupidly, because we always ask the wrong question first. The bugle call held unwavering, then snapped off mid-breath, with a metallic bite like a blade returned to its sheath. Trevor Becca said, "Tell me you packed a Bluetooth speaker as a prank." Trevor didn't answer right away. He was looking at the prop bugle lying on the tarp where he had set it, and at the small black case that held his recorder, and at the old trench that wasn't a trench anymore, but a seam the land had failed to heal. "No," he said finally. "I didn't." Somewhere close, maybe 10 yards, chains shook once, 3 quick links chattering, and then went still as if a hand had closed over them. Danny broke the spell like a medic does by making tasks. "We're fine," she said. "If someone's out here messing with us, we'll catch them." Jordan thermals sweep the tree line. Luke, stay with Maya. Becca, light the perimeter. Becca's lighter snapped crisp, click flare, small pop as the flame took. They moved. In the sudden busy shuffle tent, zippers rasped cords, ticked on tent poles, and the lantern gave a quiet, glassy clink as Jordan's elbow kissed it. The human noises felt like a warm coat thrown over cold shoulders. For a moment, the cemetery sounded like any campsite. Jordan scanned the trees and frowned. "The thermal's weird," he said. "I'm getting cold holes." He tapped the screen. The device made a soft plastic thoop. Not shadows, negatives, like something is drinking heat. He panned back toward the sag in the earth. The screen went darker at the center of that dip, as if the world there had never known noon. From that same hollow, the ground let out a low, thrumming moan. Not loud, but felt like an old ship's hull settling in a cold sea. Becca, jittery with adrenaline, snatched up the prop bugle with the logic of the very online, if the bit scares you, double down. "If you're gonna play, we'll duet," she said, half a dare, half a plea. She put the mouthpiece to her lips. Trevor swore under his breath. "Don't." The bugle's throat gave a dull, breathy cough as Becca blew an untrained, ragged note. The note died in an ugly, flapping sputter, and then over it, like a teacher correcting a child's posture, the other bugle answered with a clean, high call that slid up until it felt like the rim of a glass against a tooth. Becca lowered the instrument like it had burned her. "Okay," she said, shaking. "Okay." Maya's camera kept rolling because that was Maya's reflex. When reality went sideways, you document the angle. "If there are stories here," she said, not sure who she was addressing were listening. What came back first wasn't a word, but a footfall, a deliberate measured stamp that carried weight and authority. Another stamp followed, and then another paced like a drill. Off to their left, a second set of steps joined, and to their right, a third, until the night had a geometry of approaching rhythm. Trevor swallowed. Not Confederates or Union, he murmured, scholar's reflex intact even now. Just soldiers. Men who died where nobody wrote it down. They formed a huddle without meaning to 6 people with a lantern between them, and the fog girding them like an audience. The formations halted. In the gap that followed, the quiet was so pronounced they could hear the damp ticking in the grass, the microscopic patter of dew making and breaking at the tips of blades. Danny measured that quiet the way she measured the space after a heart stops by what must come next. "Okay," she said, eyes on the dip in the land. Everyone back to the tents. Slow. Keep your balance. As if offended by the idea of retreat, the bugle let loose again this time. A downward sweep that scraped along the inside of their skulls. They moved, but the ground seemed to rise and fall underfoot, as if someone turned the cemetery into a breath. From the trees, a horse screamed, flensed of anything domestic, and the sound plunged straight through their ribs. In the same heartbeat, metal kissed metal, a buckle turned, a bayonet knocked its scabbard, a ring of keys or shackles sang once and stopped. Maya reached for Danny's wrist and felt her own pulse in someone else's grasp. "Just get to the tents," Danny said. Inside is still inside. They made the first tent duct and sat with their knees colliding. The lantern made the thin nylon glow the color of butter. It should have felt safe. Instead, it felt like a bright confession in a dark church. Outside, the steps reformed, not marching now, but circling an orbit of weight. The bugle did not play a melody the living knew. It held a note until breath should have failed, then breathed again. Luke pressed his palms to his ears and laughed a small, deranged laugh that had nothing to do with jokes. "I'm so glad we came," he said to nobody. "I'm so glad we brought a prop." Trevor stared at the recorder he had turned on before the bugle first sounded. Its levels rolled like waves. For all his warnings, he felt something fierce and grateful now, like a historian offered a primary source. "We bear witness," he said, not to the camera, but to the slope and the fog and the trench that wasn't. "We'll tell it right." The wind answered with a threadbare sigh, lifting the tent a fraction, letting it fall with a soft, elastic snap. They all flinched anyway. Then Maya, whose job was to decide what came next, met each pair of eyes in turn. "We keep the rules," she said. "We stay till dawn." Outside, far away, and close at once, dirt slumped a ragged granular hush, like a sack of dry grain tipping open. The tent walls trembled as if they were lungs breathing in time with something outside. Nobody spoke for a long minute. When they finally did, it was Luke's sarcasm cracking under strain. "So, haunted Civil War boot camp check. What's next?" They start roll call. As if summoned, the bugle flared again, shrill, jagged, the brass cry so sharp it split the air like glass breaking in their ears. They all clamped their hands to their heads, groaning. The sound didn't fade. It drilled a piercing reed, stabbing through bone, vibrating the tender middle of their skulls. Jordan dropped the thermal cam, the screen cracking on impact, and he screamed, "It's inside my head." Trevor yanked the recorder closer. Its levels spiked violently, needles maxed out. "It's not just us hearing this," he gasped. "It's real." Becca curled into herself, rocking. "Make it stop, make it stop." The bugle note bent downward, warping into a guttural moan of brass, as though the horn itself had lungs and grief. The canvas above them quivered. Chains rattled hard, dragging across stone, the links clashing like teeth. Then silence, instant predatory silence. The group froze, every breath audible. "Don't move," Danny whispered. From the earth beneath them came a soft crumbled soil, giving way, tiny clods tumbling down into unseen hollows. Suddenly, Jordan was gone. 1 second, he sat hunched, palms clamped over his ears. The next, the ground beneath him yawned open like a rotten mouth. He dropped with a choked cry, vanishing through a hole no wider than a coffin lid. The tent floor sagged canvas, stretching into the void. They scrambled back, shrieking. A deep, dragging suck echoed up the noise of soil closing over wetly, as if unseen hands were packing earth back into place. His muffled screams rose from below, high-pitched, desperate. Then a dull, final thud, followed by silence, and the grainy hush of loose dirt settling. "No," Maya whispered, shaking her head violently. No, he's still down there." She clawed at the ground, fingers raking mud, but the soil was already firm again, betraying nothing but a faint slump. Danny seized her wrists. "He's gone," she hissed, voice breaking. "He's gone, Maya." Trevor's face was gray. "That's what they said, unburied, unblessed. They're dragging us into their graves." His words quivered. Becca shoved him hard. "Shut up, just shut the hell up." Her sob cracked the night. Outside, hooves stamped once, twice, heavy and slow, like a horse shifting weight in the dark. The sound vibrated through the ground, each impact dull as a muffled drum. A breath of fog drifted under the tent flap, curling, carrying with it a reek of rusted iron and damp wool. Luke's laugh shattered into a sob. "1 down," he whispered. 5 to go. His voice wasn't mocking now. It was prophecy. They did not unzip the tent. 5 faces made a small democracy around the lantern, and the absence of Jordan sat with them like a 6th. Maya held the camera because work steadies hands. Danny opened the first aid kit because practice is a ritual. Luke wanted to joke and swallowed it like a stone. Trevor stared at the recorder's red eye and thought about testimony. Becca pressed her nails into her palms until Crescents bit. Outside, the bugle rose again, thin at first, then razor true, threading the night with brass until the air felt stitched tight. Hoof scuffs circled them at a patient pace, each dull impact, beating through the dirt like a muffled drum. Jordan isn't gone if we can dig, Maya said. We dig him out. Trevor shook his head. They sealed him packed like crates. Then we unpack, Becca snapped. Danny nodded. Together. No splitting. They crawled out with the lantern and a folding trowel. Fog made their lights short and heavy. The collapsed spot looked ordinary in the way a predator looks docile when it's still. Maya knelt. Geordie, bang if you hear me. No answer. Danny sank the trowel. Wet clay fought back. A breath wheezed up from the soil, a cold exhale that didn't belong to lungs. To their right, chains clinked in, a trudging rhythm, metal syllables that spelled nothing living. Becca clawed faster. Her fingers met cloth, then bone. They found a sleeve sodden. They found a wrist at a bad angle. Danae gripped and pulled. The mud refused. She dug wider. The ground collapsed a little, showing a crawl space dimmer than fog and a shape that wasn't Jordan. It was a rib cage made of other rib cages, a basket of fused bone with faces pressed inside like petals in a dead bouquet. The basket breathed. They heard the inhale papery and thin, and the exhale a soft clicking as bone kissed bone. Danny recoiled, and then reached because medics move forward into the thing that's wrong. A hand built from mismatched knuckles rose and clamped her wrist. Maya and Luke hauled her back. The grip released like a decision, not a loss. The bugle slashed into a downward command, and metal whispered on metal as if bayonets were testing their cradles. Trevor croaked, "Retreat or charge no third way," and hated the sound of his own voice. They backed to the toppled angel. Its broken face looked kind. Kindness felt like mockery. Becca shook in a tremor that seemed to travel up out of the ground and settle in her bones. "They want a line," she said. "They want us to stand a line." Against what Luke asked, though he knew. Shapes detached from the fog jackets ruined by weather mouths, set to soldiers' work. Their uniforms were neither blue nor gray, but the brown of graves. Where eyes should be was mist. Boots struck together, left, right, left, each step thick and wet like drums stuffed with mud. Somewhere beyond the stones, a horse snorted and clawed hoof-scraping grit in a slow, deliberate scratch. A rifle bolt slid and clicked precise as a clock hand. "Don't run," Danny said. Lines break when someone peels off. She placed them shoulder to shoulder without touching. Maya steadied the camera. "If we keep a shape, maybe we keep a self," she whispered. Trevor looked at the stones, at names worn to smoothness, at blanks that once were names. "If we knew them, it would matter," he said and began anyway. John, Thomas, Elias, Nathan, Jacob. He spoke 100 wrong names and meant them right. The bugle answered in a short, bright bark. Contempt sharpened the sound. Wind bullied the fog into streamers that snapped with tiny wet pops. The ground didn't open. It pressed. Pressure climbed their ankles, knees, hips, jaws. The cemetery wanted to close. "Back to the tent," Luke said. No one moved. The horse came into view, high-shouldered hide the color of surrendered flags, reins dragging like veins of iron. The saddle was empty. Its skull seemed over-defined, as if pared down to purpose, and then ordered to continue. Where eyes should be were small, fixed stars that didn't exist. It breathed a high whine through invisible rents, like a fife carved from wind. It struck once. The hoof's thud shook nearby stones and made them ring like porcelain. "Don't startle the horse," Danny said, as if any rule still applied. Becca laughed and cried in the same breath. "Demon cavalry mount. Still a horse," Maya said, choosing a world in which that helped. The horse swung its head like a pendulum measuring. Trevor took the prop bugle from his bag. "We return the call," he said. "We give it back." "Don't," Danny warned, but Trevor raised it anyway, then hesitated. Before he could blow brass, shouted from the night, an abrupt shoving blare that flattened the air. Echoes didn't echo. They stacked a tower of pressure that made teeth ache. The prop bugle fell and pinged the grass. "Okay," Trevor whispered. "We can't speak their language." Maya squared her shoulders. "We came to witness. We leave to tell." Chains stirred, dragging an impatient loop that wrote an unreadable word across stone. Underfoot dirt sighed a long, surrendering hush. The soldiers didn't raise their guns. They watched. The watching itself was a vice. Luke edged sideways, not back. The formation pivoted toward him like water finding downhill. He edged again, trying not to look like prey. The horse turned its head. Attention fell with weight. Leather creaked strap on strap, followed by the faint ring of metal and steel. The bugle went silent. The quiet thickened until it had grain something you could thrum with a thumb. Danny's hand found Luke's sleeve. "Do not peel off," she breathed. "They harvest stragglers." He froze. Line held for a heartbeat for two. Fog folded and unfolded, hemming the world. From somewhere behind the stones came the hollow chalk of a shovel biting earth, and another answer to ghost work details still on shift. Trevor closed his eyes. "We are not here to steal your sleep," he said. "We are not here to mock. We didn't know." The horse blew out a harsh snort that splattered mist. Wet echoes slapped back from the stones. The nearest soldier lifted his rifle. He did it without malice, the way you shoulder a habit. "Don't break," Danny said again, softer. Becca nodded, tears bright. Maya kept filming because stopping would make her real in a way she couldn't survive. Trevor whispered a prayer that didn't belong to any church and all of them. Luke whispered a curse that belonged to everyone who's ever faced a wall and understood it. The soldiers sighted not down the barrel, but through the fog's seam, as if the night itself was his aim. Somewhere far off, a kettle drum began a slow, funeral pulse that seemed to rise from the roots of the hill. Over it, the bugle returned, not a call, but a low-held note thin as wire tightening, until the world hummed. Maya lifted the camera higher, stubborn. "We see you," she said. "We will remember." The note cut clean as a blade, and in the sudden void, their breath came loud, ragged human. The rifle did not fire. Not yet. The horse stepped sideways, placing itself between line and statue, a living gate that had forgotten how to be alive. Danny shifted her weight to keep balance against the pressing earth. "We wait for dawn," she said. "We hold." Luke's mouth twisted. "What if dawn is what they're blowing to?" No one answered. Very softly from below, soil ticked and trickled as if a mouth beneath the turf was testing its new teeth. A bayonet rasped in its sheath, bright and intimate. The soldier with a rifle lowered the muzzle until it pointed at Luke's chest, not in threat, but in inevitability. The horse's starless eyes watched patient. They stood in the shape Donnie had given them, 5 people pretending a line is the same as a wall. The cemetery pressed, the fog folded, the night asked for the rest of its story. And the rest was waiting. They breathed together, counting, daring the dark to blink first tonight. The soldier's rifle stayed aimed at Luke's chest. His breath came shallow, every inhale a betrayal. Danny whispered, "Hold." But holding was impossible when the ground itself swelled beneath their boots. A bugle cry slashed out, piercing jagged the brass note, gouging through the fog with a scream that stabbed their eardrums. Luke shrieked, clutching his head. The sound grew so sharp it felt like glass splintering in their skulls, a pressure that clawed behind the eyes. He staggered forward, right into the rifle's invisible patience. The crack of a phantom shot ripped the night short, brutal, echoless. Luke arched mouth wide, blood blooming dark against his shirt. He crumpled wordlessly at their feet. Becca screamed. Danny dropped beside him, pressing hard. "No exit wound," she whispered in disbelief. "Nothing's there except it killed him." Trevor stared, frozen. "That's two." His voice broke. Becca slapped him. "Shut up." But her eyes were wide and wild, and the truth of it was heavy in the air. Chains dragged again, metal ringing as if pulled by invisible arms. The sound looped around them, closing tighter. Hooves stomped, pounding the earth in a steady, merciless rhythm, thud, thud, thud. The spectral horse reared its starless eyes, glaring. It shrieked a high-pitched whinny that shattered into a jagged scream, like a trumpet being ripped in half. Maya yanked her camera up, trembling. "They'll take all of us," she said. "They're not letting us go." Becca bolted instinct over reason. She ran toward the broken fence, breath ragged. "No, I'm not staying in line." Danny shouted after her, but the fog swallowed Becca fast. The bugle wailed again, long, furious, a rising note that coiled into her skull. She clutched her ears, staggered, then screamed as her body convulsed. The sound dug deeper, drilling, until her shriek cut short with a wet pop, her body collapsing, twitching once before lying still. Blood leaked from her ears. Maya covered her mouth, gagging. Danny's hands shook violently. Trevor whispered, The Ken kills by sound." He could barely breathe. The silence that followed was worse than noise, heavy smothering filled with the faint scrape of shifting dirt. The soldiers stood unmoving, rifles low, as though the executions were already routine. Only 3 remained. The lantern flickered weakly. The air pressed harder, the cemetery demanding more. Maya's voice cracked as she whispered, "They won't stop until dawn. But will any of us still see it? From the earth, the world rolled out low and resonant, like timbers breaking deep underground." Danny gripped Maya's arm. "Stay close. Don't leave the line again, or we're finished." Trevor closed his eyes, trembling. "We already are." 3 left. Maya, Danny, Trevor. The lantern sputtered, casting a sickly glow over Luke's still body. The fog pressed tighter like a shroud, wrapping them in. The bugle called again, shrill, unrelenting, the brass note tearing through marrow, making the night vibrate as though the world itself were a drum. Trevor gagged, clutching his ears. They won't stop, they want all of us. The spectral soldiers' advanced boots sinking into wet earth without leaving prints. Each step thudded hollow and heavy, as if the ground itself groaned beneath them. The horse screamed again, high and violent, shaking the tombstones. Its hooves crashed down the impact, echoing like thunder caught in stone. It charged. Donnie shoved Maya aside. The animal barreled through its weight, crushing Danny beneath invisible tons. Her scream was cut off by the crunch of bone and the wet slap of flesh under iron hooves. When the fog lifted, nothing remained but red, soaking into moss. Maya sobbed, shaking uncontrollably. No. Trevor pulled her up, forcing her to run toward the fence. The soldiers followed, silent but unstoppable. Chains whipped across the graves, rattling like iron snakes, their clatter growing louder until it drowned their thoughts. Trevor tripped near a collapsed grave. From the soil, skeletal arms burst upward, ribs and femurs knitting into him. Bones cracked and snapped as they forced themselves into his skin, reshaping him into a grotesque patchwork. His scream rose and fell until it ended in a gurgling moan. The new creature shuddered, once then collapsed still. Maya, the last, stumbled blindly through the fog. The bugle's note stalked her, slashing again and again, bleeding her strength. The sound screeched so violently that she felt her brain quiver, vision flash like a spark. She reached the fence, clinging to twisted iron. A soldier emerged, bayonet fixed. He raised the rifle with mechanical calm. The shot cracked, sudden, sharp, final. Maya dropped, blood staining the roots of grass that had fed too long on silence. When the cemetery was quiet, the horse pawed once more. The bugle lifted for the last time long, and lo, a mournful reveille that wailed across the hills. It did not stop when the horizon grayed. At dawn, the sound still carried an endless call for men who would never rest. The graves had swallowed six, and the earth was content again. The bugle would blow until another foolish group dared disturb the soldiers' watch.